Well, hello again. Just a bit of a continuation from the video I did yesterday. I should have actually looked it up, but the guy that was talking about disabling the petrol ute in the movie, the pickup truck in the movie Close Encounters of the Third Kind, said he thought it was a diesel. It was a diesel. It wouldn't have worked with that truck. Now, I did actually look it up, and it was the truck they used was an F250. It didn't actually say a Ford F250. It didn't actually say whether it was a diesel or petrol. But if you actually look at the models that were available, 1974 to 1977, they came with a straight six or a V8 petrol motor. So it would have had a petrol motor, that one in the movie. And of course, you know, Mr. Dr. Knuth, presumably, he had a nice little diagram up on the blackboard, and he was showing, you know, the ignition coil and the battery and the spark plug, and then he went on to say that, you know, him and some colleagues had calculated that it would take an electromagnetic field of 3 × 10⁶ to be able to shut it down. Now, I think he said that because if he had said, so he said 3 × 10⁶ volts per metre, okay. And I think he said that because if he had said 3 million volts per metre, everyone would have fallen off their chairs laughing. Because that would just, you know, the ignition coil packs, probably didn't have those in those days, would have been one ignition coil distributor, all that would have just gone up in flames. It never would have started again, so it's completely ridiculous. I mean, it's all right for these guys to sit around and theorise about this stuff in a classroom and, you know, do some calculations on a board, but they don't think about the actual, what would actually happen in the real world if you did that, you know. Had an interesting comment left earlier on. Thank you for that comment, saying that this was one of the most interesting videos he'd seen on the subject. I think that's what it was. But he mentioned a Faraday cage, and of course a Faraday cage has to be complete. You know, if you've got big holes in it, like windscreen size holes and, you know, other size, you know, window size holes and holes underneath in the engine bay and all this sort of stuff, then it's not going to work as a Faraday cage. So I suppose it would depend on the frequency of the electromagnetic pulse, but those holes are pretty big, you know, so if you're talking about microwaves and all that sort of stuff, it's not going to be a Faraday cage. Now, there was one video. I'm getting a crowd here now. I'm in a slightly different spot today because of the way the sunlight falls and the way the breeze is blowing, so I sort of orientate the camera so that it doesn't affect the microphone. Although it doesn't look like the leaves are moving at the moment. They were when I came out here with the camera. Now, there was one interesting presentation on that Sol Foundation website, and that was from Beatriz Nilla, I think the name is, and some from Scandinavia somewhere. And she was, I think she's an astronomer. She might be an astrophysicist, and she was showing some photographic plates from 1957, I think it was, July 1957, or it might have been, it was in the 50s anyway. And she showed a photographic plate that showed a little cluster of bright objects above the Earth, and then 90 minutes later they were gone. You know, when the next photograph was taken, they were gone. So, and she said, of course, there was nothing in orbit before Sputnik in 1959, I think that was. And I thought, well, that we know of. The other thing too is that you've got to bear in mind there was an awful lot of nuclear weapon testing, and it could be that some of those explosions were powerful enough to blow debris into low Earth orbit. You know, they detonated atom bombs near ships, didn't they, to see what the sort of destructive power of the atomic bombs. A lot of the stuff that went on in the Pacific, you know, and sort of even in Australia, although I don't think the explosions in Australia were particularly powerful, but certainly Certainly the ones the Americans were detonating, and I think the Russians were detonating as well. Around that time, it was all the rage, wasn't it? You know, in the 50s, detonating atom bombs. So it could just be, I think, debris blown into low Earth orbit by nuclear weapons testing, or it could be that, you know, it was debris from a failed orbital attempt. The Russians might have launched something, the Americans might have launched something that sort of broke up and it just got high enough to leave some debris in low Earth orbit. It doesn't have to be a squadron of alien spacecraft. But I thought her presentation was interesting. Now, I saw something, there was a podcast, Eric Weinstein knows people with first-hand experience of ET. Actually, the word he used was encounters. Yeah. So again, you know, he's joined the David Grush bandwagon. He's coming on there saying he knows people that have told him they've had first-hand experience with this, with ETs or ET materials. It's not a David Grush, he hasn't seen anything himself. He actually goes on to say, in his own words, that he hasn't seen any credible evidence to support ET coming here. There is no tangible evidence to support ET coming here. That's in the same interview. At the beginning he says, Eric talks to David every day. Now, is he talking about himself in the third party, or is he talking about Eric Davis? Eric talks to David every day. What exactly does that mean? You know, if it's Eric Davis again, it's going back to the core, isn't it? It's going back to the core of the piffle peddlers that are spreading all this nonsense and have been doing it for years. So again, there's nothing there. Eric Weinstein said, this physicist, there was 2 or 3 physicists working on anti-gravity experiments. The Australians released some information in 1971. Well, I should have made a note of the guy's name, but he was very interested in gravity, and he was working with another guy on a theory to connect quantum mechanics to relativity, trying to find this common sort of thing that Chris Letho said he solved the other day. Oh dear. But that was his interest, and Eric Weinstein said this must be because they'd been inspired by something they'd seen or something they'd been told, you know, suggesting that there was an alien spacecraft with anti-gravity properties that they'd heard about, or they'd been told about, or even shown, and they were working on an anti-gravity type thing. And of course an anti-gravity propulsion system is okay for flying around a planet, but not terribly useful for flying in between stars. So yeah, I think put a line through that. But Kevin Nuth, I'll just get back to this, I should have said this actually, with his 3 million volt per metre electromagnetic field. I was really expecting at any moment a shepherd's crook, you know, to come from stage left and pull him off. You know, thank you, Professor. Well, thank you, Doctor. Is that really the time? And on to the next presenter. Now, what else have we got here? I say I made up a few notes here, but they could have been more detailed. Haven't had a lot of time, been pretty busy, you know how it goes. Lou Elizondo is bringing out a book. Now, it's been delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed and delayed, and I think the reason for the delay is Lou is standing back and he's watching how people are reacting to all this science fiction bullshit we've been hearing from Grush and Co. recently. You know, are people swallowing it? Is there much pushback from it? Is Tim Burchett and Co. going to find there's nothing to it? I think that's why he's sitting back. He's sitting back and he's waiting to see to see what happens, because I think what he's got in mind is seeding the book, because it's going to be his military memoirs. No one's going to be interested in that. You know, he's going to have to seed the book with intriguing ET stuff for it to sell. Now, all we ever see from Lou is, I really can't talk about that. I believe maybe there's, you know, maybe we're not alone. This is all we see from Lou Elizondo. So what's he going to put in the book? Is it going to be something like this? Is it going to be something like this? This, of course, written by Hans Christian Andersen, master of, most prolific writer of fairy tales in modern literature. Well, it might as well have been, mightn't it, really? I mean, I saw his son being interviewed and he said they had to put a lot of fabricated stuff in there so it would sell. So what does that tell you? But I think Corso went to the publisher with the book, his military memoirs, and they said, look, you know, you're going to sell half a dozen copies of this, probably 4 of them to your mother. How can we spice it up so it will sell? And he's asked Corso what he was doing exactly. And as soon as Corso said he worked for Foreign Materials Division, the Foreign Materials Division at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, it would have been straight into, oh, did the Roswell debris go there? I mean, if you'd seen the Roswell debris there, this would be a bestseller. If you'd seen aliens there, it'd be a bestseller. And that's the yarn that was spun in that book. He saw aliens. He was distributing alien materials to companies to reverse engineer. That's what made the book a bestseller. And all of that stuff is a fabrication. None of that's real. If none of that was in there, no one would have bought the book. No one would have been interested. Elizondo's book is going to be the same. Now, I don't know if you can see that, but this is one of the early editions I got. That's a big red flag that it's co-written with William J. Burns, I think. Foreword by Senator Strom Thurmond. Now, Senator Thurmond, when he saw this book, he said, that's not the book I wrote the foreword for. He said, this is all rubbish. The book he wrote the foreword for was Philip Corso's military memoirs. I don't know why I'm looking at the screen. I'm probably looking away from the camera. Sorry about that. So, I don't know whether that makes this worth some money, because this is the one with the foreword by Strom Thurmond. I don't know if that's a collector's item. Leave a comment below if you think it is. I've read it. I don't need to keep it. You know, if it's worth 10 grand, I'll sell it, or more. I shouldn't have said that, should I? And I think Lou Elizondo is thinking, what the hell am I going to write in this book? Am I going to seed it with this extraterrestrial reverse engineering nonsense, you know? What can I seed it with without actually saying, yes, I know they're here. I've personally worked on the materials. I've handled the materials. You know, what's he going to say in the book? And I think he's stepping back. I think his conscience might be bothering him a bit, you know. I mean, he could go down the science fiction route just for the cash, make it a bestseller. I manage these projects, I was there, I've handled the materials, there are so many species of aliens, you know, he could go down that path. But if all he's going to write in his book is his memoirs, and, well, I worked at the Pentagon when, you know, Lukatsky and Stratton were running around Skinwalker Ranch looking for werewolves and dino beavers. Then he's not going to be selling many books, is he? I mean, as soon as someone reads it, and they do a review on the internet, and they say, oh, well, all it refers to is ATIP, which apparently was a hobby program, you know, that Lou Elizondo used to run. You know, ORSAP was the real program. You know, when they were when Lakatsky gave $22 million to Bob Bigelow to research Skinwalker Ranch, looking for werewolves and paranormal stuff, dino beavers. I think they were looking for UFOs as well, but they didn't see any, did they? It's all rubbish. You see the book. I haven't read it, but you know, I've seen it shown. And you've got a book sort of that thick about all these stories from Skinwalker Ranch, not one photograph. I think Stephen Greenstreet of the New York Post has done a very good job of debunking all that. He said he's been to Skinwalker Ranch, there's nothing there. He's looked deeply into the funding for all this stuff, ORSAP and ATIP. ATIP wasn't even a real program. What's Lou Elizondo going to write about that? You know, is he going to put both of his resignation letters in the book and then explain them and say which one's real and why there is two? I mean, if I was going to resign from work, it'd be very short and sweet, probably one sentence. All I'd have to do is to look in a dictionary to see how many R's there are in arse. It would be as simple as that. So I'm really not expecting very much from Lou Elizondo's book. If it's full of sensationalistic science fiction codswallop, like this one, it may very well sell well. If his agenda is just to make as much cash out of this while he can, you know, as much cash as possible while he can, maybe that's his agenda, maybe that's what he'll do. But I think his book is going to get torn to shreds, very much like this one, if he starts making really wild claims about interacting with ET materials, you know, be it biological or technical. When I read this, I thought this is complete and utter rubbish. I did read it from cover to cover, but that was the opinion I formed. I thought it was hilarious when he said there was these little hollow glass tubes, little tiny hollow glass tubes. Gave them to some company and they came up with fibre optics. Because fibre optics, they're called fibre optic cores, are not hollow, they're solid. You know, so how is that? It would have occurred to the aliens that, you know, using solid fibre cores rather than hollow glass tubes for fibre optic communications is a lot more efficient. Used hollow tubes for fibre optic communications, you'd be getting all kinds of weird reflections in there. It'd be bouncing around all over the place. You know, instead of having a 100-kilometre range, you probably have a range of about 8 feet. So, you know, complete and utter rubbish. This is the back of it. From the Roswell Daily Record. Remember the guy that ran the Mogul balloon program, 600-foot balloon strings with instrument packages on? Said he fell about laughing when he'd heard that Brazel had found this thing on his ranch, because he knew it was balloon string number 4. He even knew which balloon string it was. It was made of exactly the same materials Mac Brazel described when he picked up the wreckage. Balsa wood sticks, rubber strips, Scotch tape. You think aliens are going to be popping into the local Kmart, local hardware store and buying Scotch tape? You know, we've got to cross the galaxy, we've got to get to Earth, and we've got to get to this hardware store because we need that Scotch tape. You know, it gets more and more ridiculous. The more you look into it, the more ridiculous everything looks. The more fanciful it all looks, the less you find. And now these guys are actually saying, you know, oh, people told me this, but I've never ever seen any credible evidence. I've never seen any tangible evidence. That's what Eric Weinstein's saying. He thought it was a lot of rubbish a few years ago. But he's been talking to people that have convinced him there's something to it. But he hasn't seen any credible evidence. He hasn't seen any tangible evidence. He's just choosing to believe what he's being told. Because a few people are telling him. Not just one person is telling him, but a few people. And as I said in one of the videos, you know, not that long ago, you get people like Eric Davis, they're told something, they spread it as truth. Because it comes from Eric Davis, aerospace engineer, works for this, you know, company building space stuff, it must be true. And then it gets repeated by them, and them, you know. And it goes on and on and on. Before you know it, you end up with a load of people that are saying, "Oh yeah, I know this is true," you know, as fact, when they don't. So, so let me know if you think the version of this with the foreword by Senator Strom Thurmond is worth anything. Because remember, he was jumping up and down. I want my foreword removed from that book. That's not the book I saw. Because the book he saw was the original Corso military memoirs. No one's interested in that. It had to be seeded with all this E.T. Roswell rubbish for it to sell. All right, well, again, I didn't start my watch. I don't know how the time has gone on this particular video. But yeah, I thought I'd better just do another quick video this morning to mention that F-250 in that movie Close Encounters, you know, from when the character Roy Neary is stopped in his ute and he's looking at the map, you know, and the flying saucer comes above, puts a beam of light down on him. It was an F-250, either had a straight 6 petrol engine or a V8 petrol engine in it. And Dr. Knuth said that was a diesel, and I said in yesterday's video, you know, he was wrong about that. He was just like he's wrong about everything else, he said. So, and the only worthwhile presentation I have seen so far, I haven't looked at all of them, but you know, I dismiss the consciousness and the metaphysical part of it, you know, because you know, if it's not tangible, then you can't see it, you can't measure it. Put it in the bin, you know, it clouds the issue. Consciousness and all that sort of stuff, put a line through it, it's a waste of time. You can't prove or disprove any of that. So I haven't looked at all of them. I'm not going to look at some of them because of the titles, you know. You got religious people there, a couple of religious people doing presentations, completely pointless. As I said in a previous video, you know, unless an alien spacecraft lands, it's intact and it's fitted with stained glass windows showing their religious icons. What is the point of them being there exactly? No point at all. It's just padding, you know. It's just padding. But that one particular presentation by that Scandinavian Beritz, I can't pronounce her last name. I thought that one was interesting, but I also think there is a down-to-earth explanation for what's on those photographic plates. So it would either be debris from failed space launch, because they were experimenting with it at the time. You know, I mean, they were mucking around launching V2s since the end of the war. You know, the Americans had von Braun and they were doing rocket research. They were trying to get stuff into orbit, you know. V2s get into space. They went up and they came down again. Didn't orbit, as far as I know. But that doesn't mean that something else did, you know. It might have got 200 or 300 kilometres up and then exploded. She just saw the little cloud of debris on one photographic plate reflecting the sunlight. So there are loads of, you know, there's lots of explanations that could be, you know, nuclear bomb debris. It doesn't have to be a little cluster of extraterrestrial spacecraft. Mind you, I don't think she claims that's what it is. I think she just says, you know, this is interesting. It was there, and then it wasn't, you know. But I watched that video a few days ago, so I don't remember it in detail. I just remember the photographic plate bit. All right. Well, I think that's more than enough for today. I probably won't probably be busy during the week, so I doubt I'll be making another video before next weekend if there's another one coming so soon. As always, many thanks for watching, and maybe I'll catch you again.